Welcome back, everybody, to Business Monday. I am Josh Fenton. This is Mr. Innovation, Saul Kaplan. We are looking out the windows at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We see a FedEx truck directly across the street. Is that the solution to getting Providence school children to schools? We could just ship them in FedEx trucks.
Maybe it's the scooters. Maybe it's jump scooters back and forth.
Well, the first day, as you may know, Kate Nangle was literally there when it happened. A girl who used to take the bus had a jump bike and got hit by a car that first morning as she was trying to go to Nathan Bishop Middle School.
I understand.
So much for innovation.
Well, listen, I understand that different stakeholder groups, employer groups need to fight for benefits and salary.
Yeah.
But when it's at the expense of our youth, the future of the state, I draw the line there. We should not be holding students hostage. For these negotiations. It's just bad business, really is.
We were talking earlier that the proficiency rate at Mount Pleasant High School for English at the high school level is 9%. And for mathematics, it's 4.5%. Might their proficiencies increase if they didn't go to school? Because certainly there's not a lot of learning going on at that school.
Well, why don't we debate the test?
Right. It's always the test.
Why don't we debate how we measure it instead of actually being honest and saying whatever tool you use to measure it, it's really no good. And we need to transform it.
Over the weekend, Thursday, the SEC announced that they were investigating Tesla and Elon Musk for his August tweet saying that he was going to take the company private at $420 per share. That looked to be a little out of bounds, according to the Securities and Exchange Commission. And they announced an inquiry on formal investigation on Thursday. By Sunday, they had reached a settlement for $20 million penalty to Mr. Musk, $20 million penalty to Tesla, and he had to relinquish his position as chairman of the board, could remain as CEO. An expensive tweet, but not really that punitive as the stock went up 15% or 10% today.
This is a fairly straightforward, what I call a wrist slap.
Yes, right.
Not that $20 million isn't real
money. Well, isn't chairman of the board far more important?
No, even that. Listen, I first saw that the way this came down is the SEC negotiated with Elon and his team, had a deal on the table. It looked like a fairly typical deal. You relinquish your chairman role for a few years, but you could return. You can stay in the company as the CEO, right? So, which would have been the bigger deal. And the money, they asked for a couple of new board members on the thing. It was pretty typical, right? And he walked away. When I first read it, he said no to the deal. And I'm like, what is going on with this guy? Someone needs to get in this guy's ear. If he goes to court with this thing, he could lose the whole company.
Absolutely.
Right? And you saw the stock price start to tank. So somebody got in his ear, and got him to think better of it. And he went back to the table, and he took the deal. He lives to disrupt another day. It's an expensive lesson, but he was clearly in the wrong. It's one thing to tweet what you're thinking about, but when you're the CEO and chairman of a publicly traded company, and you start tweeting out material information that can affect the stock price, right? That's clearly against the law. And I think he should feel pretty fortunate, to still, have his job and get it behind him, and get on with the business of producing these cars, and disrupting transportation is what he really needs to be doing.
Over the weekend, I think it became official, California implemented a policy that requires publicly traded companies headquartered in California to have at least one woman on their overseeing board, whether it's board of directors or whatever. Your thoughts on that? Is that the place of government to demand privately held companies to, even if they're publicly traded, they are private ventures, that they have to have a woman on? Or is that, listen guys, boys, let's get with it, it's 2018, there's plenty of brilliant women that could help your companies.
Well, I mean, listen, this should happen because it's the right thing to do, and because you don't have to look around to know, that we need a diverse set of participants on the board, including gender diversity. California loves to be at the cutting edge. It's certainly large enough and has some leverage. It affects
Seventh largest economy in the world. I
No,
think
it's
that's what
pretty
it is.
amazing,
Seventh,
and
eighth.
you see this on multiple domains where California pushes, and the federal government can't just wave their hands through, what California does because it's such a large part of our economy. So I actually welcome, the fact that they're pushing the envelope. I wish it wasn't necessary. We should comprise boards, with the diversity that reflects our communities, and we should do it aggressively.
But you haven't seen a great progress. I mean, 2 Fortune 500s female CEOs will get picked up this year. 2 will get dropped off next year. I mean, there's been no major progress.
No, it's gone the wrong way.
It's
I mean, it's
in
actually
many
it's
positions.
actually gotten worse. No, it's not an easy problem to solve because you don't just become
You
the
can't
CEO.
legislate it, right?
Yeah, and you don't just become the CEO, right? You gotta build a set of experiences and roles. It takes time, but it doesn't mean that we can't accelerate it. That we can't put promising women or any kind of diversity that we want on our board, that we can't accelerate that, and that we can't find representatives to do it, and there should be no excuses on this. So if California is going to do more than a subtle nudge, towards that, I think it's a good idea, even if I don't believe ultimately, that this should be regulated, but it looks like unless we provide some pretty clear mandates that a lot of this doesn't happen.
Me Too has had a profound effect on the workplace. Numerous men alleged to have had extremely bad behavior have lost very significant positions. Not many have gone to jail. I think only Bill Cosby is the only one facing jail time for sexual assault, somewhat tied to the workplace. Obviously, last week with the Senate hearings, relative to the Supreme Court nominee, we entered even another phase, or maybe it was the second phase of Anita Hill, but whatever it might be, all this is going to have a profound effect on business. How's it going to work? How's it going to play out? What's the impact going to be in your BIF crystal ball?
Oh, well, the way I look at it, it is inevitable and it's right, and we should welcome and accelerate this. Look at us, we're actually having a national conversation.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, it's true.
Right.
And it's an uncomfortable conversation,
Yep.
for sure. But it needs to be had. And we can't wave our hands through it or walk away from it. We need to get people with different views, at the same table. I loved, what Jeff Flake did. And even if it's just a symbol
Right.
of, we're going to have a different conversation here, that maybe we can do what's right and we can get out of this partisan, polarized, kind of debate back and forth. Now, what will happen at the end of this week, I don't know. I can tell you, I hope that we get to a resolution, that doesn't send us back, 20 years.
Right.
And if we do, and there's a pretty high probability that the investigation will be constrained, and we won't get the kind of information we need, and that we'll put Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
I think the odds today are pretty high that that's going to happen. It shouldn't happen, but it could. I'd be disappointed in it, but boy, there's going to be backlash to that. Never mind just in the midterm elections coming up, but for a very, very long time, and there should be. People have a right to be angry about this. People have a right to expect a society where we're not dealing with those issues. So I don't know if it's a crystal ball or not, and how much of it is wishful thinking. It always takes longer than I want. That's just always true. But there's reasons to be both discouraged in the near term, but encouraged about the direction that we're headed in.
So let's talk about monumental changes. Gary and I talked about it a little bit. GE. If you want the poster child for disruption,
Yeah.
self-inflicted disruption, by the way,
Yeah.
is GE.
Oh my goodness.
Once I said it last segment, used to be on the cover of every other month's Forbes or Fortune. most admired company, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 you name it. Their
Yeah.
CEO was this, that, or the other thing. And now it looks like the wheels have completely come off.
Yeah.
Third CEO in 12 months.
Less than a year, right? So
Yep.
John Flannery, who's now out, thrown out by the board, less than 12 months. I mean,
Yeah.
CEO of a major company.
Like
you know,
Gordon
trying-
Gee at Brown University,
like,
right?
That's unbelievable. But look at the results.
Jerry
and
Ford, Gordon Gee, John Flannery, right? That's it.
It's pretty amazing that it happened that quickly. We've talked about GE before. This is the behemoth that should have been working on the transformation to the new digital world. I thought the ideas were right, but you don't turn that kind of ocean liner overnight.
Well, they rolled it overnight.
It's pretty unbelievable. Hey, you should listen to, sorry for the shameless pitch here, but I just did a podcast interview with Beth Comstock, who was the vice chair at GE. 27 years. She was the voice of innovation at GE. She orchestrated a lot of the progress that
We'll
they
plug
made.
that in this article.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
you
it's
should
really-
listen to it.
Yeah,
'Cause
absolutely.
and now she's a free agent, and after 27 years at GE, and we had a very, very interesting conversation about what it takes to move innovation in the context of a very large enterprise like GE. And there are examples of where they were making progress, but at that scale and with the expectations of Wall Street,
Yeah.
what they were, they didn't move fast enough. They got really, really hurt. They jettisoned a lot of businesses, probably waited too long to do it. The stock price has taken a major hit, and now the CEO finds himself out of a job. So they've got a lot of work to do to get that repositioned, to take the remaining assets and to make it exciting again. And so we'll see what the new CEO can do, but it's a sad story. It affects a lot of people, including here in Rhode Island, where we had
Right.
hopes of small in the grand scheme of things, but not for Rhode Island.
No, originally it was supposed to have 100 jobs by this February, according to the agreement with Commerce Corporation. I think at last count they're at 50. I would think that is somewhat in question now. But the promise was over the next couple years it would be 300 to 400 jobs
Right.
here. But also to the region, GE's headquarters was going to Boston with big promises of thousands of jobs and a major headquarters being built in the city, and all those things are in
They're
question
going to take
as well.
a much bigger hit. They have a lot more at stake.
They
in
wrote off
that,
$23 billion. That probably hurts your chances of the
Right.
good carpet
We could
in
be
the new headquarters.
We could be fine here, although the folks that they were going to put here, the platform they were going to put here was part of their digital strategy
Right.
that they backed off from. But we don't have as much at stake, as they do in Boston
Right.
and in other places. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. Bikes, scooters. Scooters came, they left. They don't seem to be coming back. Bikes are here.
Yeah.
Seem to be more welcomed.
Yeah.
Seem to be much more well used. Seem to be vaguely safer. Is it the known because most people know how to ride a bike? They don't seem to be on sidewalks quite as much. They seem to actually, in many cases, not all, seem to be following some expectation of traffic rules and et cetera. Is that the appropriate amount of innovation, or are you still going back to your death ride, Evel Knievel bird scooters?
Boy, is that, in the eyes of the beholder, the appropriate amount of innovation?
Yes, that's my
Everybody loves
question.
innovation until it affects them. Right?
Until you until someone dies right on the curb in front
Well,
of
this is
your
a
business.
different. So Jump is a different business model.
Totally.
Than the birds. First of all, these are electric bikes.
Right.
Not scooters. Although Jump does have the beginnings of a scooter play,
Yeah.
but they're only in one city right now. Whereas it looks to me like there's probably 15 cities, including Providence now. Where they put the electric bikes. They're tethered to a docking station, so
Right.
they're not just willy-nilly left on street corners. You have to put them in to the actual dock.
A
And-
guy riding
Yeah.
on his jump ran out of energy in front of our house on.
I left it there?
And was not pleased with the fact that he no longer had. And I guess when you lose the energy, it's not an easy thing to pedal. This is like going uphill.
Oh, it doesn't just become a bicycle?
It did not appear to. I don't know enough, but it did not look like.
So are the pedals just to make it look like you're like pedaling the bicycle?
Could be.
The other thing that they've done, and you might know the details of this, I don't, that they came in here and they must have created an arrangement with the city.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And so now the city has a vested interest. I'm guessing. I
Yeah.
don't
No.
know,
Absolutely.
That they get a piece of every. They get a
Uh,
piece of every
yeah.
transaction. I'm
Right.
imagining.
Yeah.
So from the city standpoint, this is new revenue.
Yeah.
Whereas the Bird folks just came in and put the bikes out here before
It's called
they
the
had it
Raymond
done.
Patriarca Senior Provision.
Yeah.
You get a piece of all the action, right?
Yeah, so now the city is more aligned to the interest of it, so that makes it more viable in itself. And then I don't know, how well this is known, but this thing is owned by Uber.
Right.
Right, like jump
Right.
scooters is owned by Uber.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting play for Uber. That's all about the sharing economy. This isn't sharing. This is just they own the bicycles.
Yeah, right.
So they have the capital to invest in to be able to create those shiny red,
Yeah.
bicycles that are sitting in those stations. So we'll see. I think Uber's pretty serious about creating yet another option, to get from A to B in a way that's user-friendly. So I like the concept. It's aligned to the city, and they have a vested interest in it. So let's see. Let's see how it does, and whether the scale of Providence, right,
Is big enough.
is big enough for the economics of this thing to work for all the parties concerned.
EcoRI had a story saying that it might be a little red line too. The jump bikes don't seem to be all over the city. They just seem to be in the more affluent areas, the east side,
Well, I see them on
downtown
the east side,
Providence.
yeah.
They don't quite get over to the south side or the west end or to Onlyville.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not quite as equitable as some
Yeah.
have thought.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they did the math on where are the parts of the city where it's more likely that someone's going to take out their charge card and and pay for this thing. But also the city itself, must have had a role in giving them access to where they put those stations.
Yeah, those stations,
right?
yeah.
So they had a seat at that table. So it'd be interesting. I've not seen these details. Maybe I
Yeah.
missed them, but I just haven't seen them. Like, I would love to understand what is the business relationship with the city.
Right.
Right. What's the role that the city has in deciding where these stations are?
Yeah.
What are the viable regulations that kind of govern and manage this? So that'll answer your question of how much innovation is enough, how all the stakeholders come together, in a way where the conditions are right, for this new model, to develop. And the other way to look at it is who's ox's gourd.
Right.
Who doesn't want that? When somebody plucks their charge card down to use a jump cycle, what did that replace? Who's being disrupted, by that? So pretty interesting example. I'm glad it's here.
Bird Scooter, who is here and has left and may or may not be coming back, has got a reported valuation of $1 billion.
Really?
Yeah, I believe reported last week.
Yep.
Seems to be a good little piece of business if you can handle a Bird Scooter.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, the way they handled Providence, again, smaller scale.
Right.
Wasn't that impressive, because if you don't get the city, to play, and
It's been their
how do you-
strategy in all cities. They
Yeah.
they kind of come in the dark of night, they roll them out and see what happens and see what the community
Yeah.
reacts. They did not go to Boston, as I think was well reported, because Marty Walsh said, you come in and we're going to throw them in the
They were
tow yard.
I think they were throwing them in the harbor like it's
No,
tea.
that was Worcester.
Like it's
That was
tea or
in
something.
Worcester,
Like, they're
I
gonna
think.
dump it into the
No,
harbor.
actually, Worcester had a bike company
Yeah.
go there, and they actually left. It was Jump's competitor,
Yeah.
and those just got destroyed.
Yeah. Well, now that there's a relationship with the city, and I don't know how much money the city will make from this, but whatever it is, believe me, the next player that comes in, is either going to offer a better deal and jump, at the end of their contract, or they're not going to play.
All of this has been a major topic of almost everything we've talked about is transportation and how different transportation is beginning to look.
Yeah.
We are still car bound. We've seen a couple RIPTA buses go by, but we're in this rock and roll era of transformation of transportation in cities around the country, Providence being one of them. Is that pace going to continue to explode?
Yeah.
We took the ferry down to Newport on Saturday. We took it back. It was great. You kind of wonder, why can't it be,
right,
permanent year-round? Right. I guess, a few days a year it's not going to work because of weather, but it seems like a lot of days of the year it could work, or another type
Absolutely.
of vessel.
Yeah.
It was tried about 7 or 8 years ago, I want to say, and failed. There was a federal grant to run it out of off of Allen's Avenue, but it now seems like a few years later it might work. What's your thoughts on it? Is BIF working on any of these, designs and trying to rethink how transportation, how people move for the efficiency of communities?
Most of what we focus on at BIF is how do we reimagine education, how do we reimagine healthcare, and how do we reimagine public services.
Yeah.
So we haven't done anything specific to the transportation industry, but it's the same. It's a systems challenge or opportunity.
Right.
It requires a system solution, and these new models change the psychology. So this Saturday night, we took an Uber from our home up on the east side, downtown for dinner. We knew that one, it was water fire night, not a good idea
to bring a car,
bringing our car down. And two, we're probably going to have a glass of wine, at dinner. And why wouldn't we just take an Uber?
Right.
It's not that expensive. It's easy to use. And then we talked about it. My wife and we said, would we have ever, before Uber, would we have ever called a taxi?
Never.
Never once.
Nope.
It wouldn't even occur to us to have called a taxi to get from the east side, to dinner and then back again. And yet this easy to use app that's transparent, we can see when the car's coming.
Right.
I don't even have to take my charge card out. At the end, I just pop out of the car and say thank you.
Yeah.
It made it so easy, and nothing that Uber created did they invent.
Right.
The app,
Nope.
Everybody can create an app. Like the kids at Brown can write an app.
Right.
The kids at RISD can write an app. They invented nothing. They created a new business model that transformed the experience, in our case, to get to a restaurant and back. That's what a new business model does. That's what innovation does. It's not about the new invention or technology. It's about a different way to solve a problem. And that's what those jump scooters do too. There are people that want it to be easier to get from A to B. In the existing modes of transportation, that RIPTA bus that just came by, or parking here downtown, are just not great options. Why shouldn't we allow new options that are safe and you can't argue aren't in the best interest of consumers? Why wouldn't we allow more of that to happen? Now, why don't we take that same kind of thinking and approach and get at some of the real serious challenges
Right.
we have, like our education system, like our healthcare system.
Why would you want to mess around with success like 9% proficiency in English and 4.5% proficiency in mathematics at Mount Pleasant High School?
I don't know. How long do we have? How long do we talk? Now, let me count the reasons why. How about our entire future is about enabling our youth and creating a future workforce that can drive an economy that's based on knowledge, and doing it in a way where everybody in Rhode Island can play and participate, right? I don't know. Why would we want to do that?
Right. I don't know. As always, a master of innovation, a great across all the different issues hitting Rhode Island. One last question. Are you surprised how uninnovative this governor's race is?
Uninnovative?
Yeah, no big ideas. Nobody's talking about a big idea. We're talking about guns in schools. I mean, nothing, no shockingly
Yeah.
big thoughts about how to improve and transform Rhode Island.
Yeah. Well, I
Keep
think
it on, the governors keep it on the track, and Mayor Fung's take it back to the way it used to be, it seems like.
I think some of this is, and this is true in politics a lot, like is playing not to lose,
Yeah.
right? So if it looks fairly stable and predictable, after we get through the primaries and it looks like someone's in the lead, well, you don't want to screw up the lead, right? No, you wonder if you're behind, there you're more likely to try something novel and different and to be bolder, but I don't see that either.
No,
right?
we don't see
so
it.
I always say a pox on all of their houses, right?
Yeah.
Because in the end it's about our future and we need to be far bolder about it. But the game of politics is about winning an election, right? And so I'm not an expert on what it takes to win an election. All I can do is advocate for bolder, clearer leadership that puts us on a path to transforming our community and our economy and really allowing the organic talent that we have here,
Right.
For the conditions for them to take more responsibility, to be more accountable for creating a stronger future. Let's stop pointing at the politicians and the institutions, and let's start looking in at ourselves to say, wait a minute, we have the conditions, we can self-organize to drive the kind of change that we want,
Right.
and why don't we point more of that towards creating a better future here in our own community. So.
Right. Saul Kaplan, Mr. Innovation, Business Innovation Factory, thanks so much for joining us on Business Monday. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody for tuning in. It's been a busy afternoon on Business Monday. I want to thank everybody. Thanks our friends at Deepwater Wind, Commerce RI, Saul Kaplan, and our guests earlier today. Tomorrow afternoon, Kate Nagel's probably going live with Pulitzer Prize winning author Bob Woodward over at the Convention Center right about now. And then tomorrow afternoon, we may have a super interesting guest, one of the leading writers in the country who's got a major new movie coming out. And check back with us on 3:30 tomorrow. And then in the 4 o'clock hour, Laura Afonso will have her show on everything cool going on in eating and drinking. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening. See you tomorrow on Go Local Live.